The alarm bells rang through the Volani research station like screaming metal birds. Commander Hyun-woo rushed down the silver corridors, his forearms moving quickly as other Volani scientists stepped aside. The emergency lights painted everything red, making the peaceful station feel like a war zone. "What is happening?" Hyun-woo asked as he entered the communication center. His aide, Lieutenant Bo-ram, stood before a wall of glowing screens. Her normally calm face showed pure fear. "Sir, we got a distress signal from the Kepler sector," Bo-ram said. Her voice shook. "It is bad. Very bad." Hyun-woo looked at the main screen. The signal came from a star system called Altair, far away from any major space routes. The message played in broken pieces, full of static and panic. "This is Admiral Veltar of the Kashari Defense Fleet," the voice said. "Our worlds are under attack. They came from the dark space between stars. Machines that eat everything, they take our people and turn them into monsters. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We have maybe 3 days before they finish with us." The message cut to images that made Hyun-woo's blood run cold. Massive black ships shaped like claws hung over green worlds. Beams of red light shot down from the ships, turning cities into glass. Smaller ships flew through the air, catching fleeing people in metal nets. "The Voidclaw Empire," Bo-ram whispered. "I thought they were just stories." Hyun-woo had heard the stories too. A race of beings that were part machine, part something else. They traveled from system to system, taking everything they needed. They turned captured people into cyborg slaves. They stripped planets bare of all life and resources. Most civilized species thought they were myths. "How far away is the Altair system?" Hyun-woo asked. 12 days by our fastest ships," Bo-ram replied. "But sir, we do not have any fast ships available. The refugee crisis in the Omega sector has all our fleets busy. Even if we left right now, we would arrive too late." Hyun-woo stared at the screen. The images showed children running from metal monsters, families torn apart by machines that felt no emotion, entire cities burning while the attackers collected the survivors like items in a store. "What about the other major powers?" he asked. "The Zenthari Federation? The Crystal Collective?" "Too far away," Bo-ram said. "And even if they were close, the Voidclaw fleet is huge. The Kashari are reporting over 200 capital ships. That is bigger than most sector defense forces." The room fell quiet except for the continuing distress signals. More voices joined the first one, all begging for help that would never come. Hyun-woo closed his eyes and tried to think. Millions of innocent people would die because nobody was close enough to help them. Then Bo-ram spoke again, very quietly. "Sir, there might be one option." "What?" "The Sol system, the humans." The other Volani in the room made sounds of fear and disgust. One of them, a young scientist named Dalho, stepped forward. "Sir, you cannot be serious. The humans are monsters. They are worse than the Voidclaw." Hyun-woo had heard the stories about humans too. They came from a world so dangerous that it had turned them into living weapons. Their planet, called Earth or Terra, was full of deadly animals, poisonous plants, and natural disasters that would kill most other species in hours. The humans had survived it all and become the top predator on their world. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how they fought wars. Most civilized species fought carefully. They tried to avoid civilian casualties. They followed rules about what weapons were acceptable. They would surrender when the fight was hopeless to save lives. Humans did none of these things. They would burn their own cities rather than let enemies take them. They would fight until every last person was dead. They made weapons so terrible that using them was considered a war crime. When they fought each other, they did it with such violence that other species had to look away. 50 years ago, the galactic community had tried to include humans in a peacekeeping mission. The humans had ended the conflict in 3 days, but their methods were so brutal that 2 alien species had nightmares for generations afterward. Since then, the Sol system had been marked as a quarantine zone. No one went there, and humans were not allowed to leave. "The humans are violent, yes," Hyun-woo said slowly, "but they are not evil. They fight to protect what they care about. Maybe they will care about protecting innocent people." "Sir," Dalho said. If we contact the humans, we might save the Altair system. But we might also wake up something that will destroy the entire galaxy. Is it worth that risk? Hyunwoo looked at the screen again. A new message was playing. This one showed Void Claw machines breaking into a school. The children inside were screaming as metal arms reached for them. Send the message, he said. Sir? Boram asked. Send the distress signal to the Sol system. Include everything we know about the Void Claw attack. Include the location of Altair and how much time is left. Boram hesitated. Sir, this goes against all galactic protocols. If the High Council finds out, I will take full responsibility, Hyunwoo said. But I will not let millions of people die because we were too afraid to ask for help. Boram nodded and began working at her station. The other Villani watched in silence as she prepared the transmission. The message would travel through hyperspace, reaching the Sol system in just a few hours. If the humans received it, if they decided to help, they could be at Altair in 2 days. But nobody knew if the humans would come. Nobody knew what they would do if they did come. The only thing everyone knew was that calling the humans was like opening a door to something that might never be closed again. The message shot out into space, carrying with it the desperate hope of the dying and the fears of the living. In a few hours, humanity would know that someone in the galaxy needed their help. What they would do with that knowledge would change everything. The message from space reached Luna Base at exactly 14:23 Earth Standard Time. Senior analyst Dong Hyun was drinking his third cup of coffee when every alarm in the deep space monitoring station started screaming at once. What the hell? He muttered, spilling hot coffee on his uniform. He rushed to his workstation where dozens of screens showed incoming data from the hyperspace receivers. After 30 years of watching empty space, something had finally happened. The signal was alien. Not just alien technology, but an actual message from real living aliens asking humans for help. Dong Hyun read the translation 3 times before his brain accepted what he was seeing. Get me Admiral Yoonji right now, he shouted to his assistant. Code Black Emergency. Tell her the aliens are calling. 2 hours later, Admiral Yoonji sat in the war room deep inside the Pentagon. Around the table sat the most powerful military leaders on Earth. General Peterson from the Army, Admiral Chen from the Navy, General Williams from the Air Force, and Space Marshal Rodriguez from the Orbital Defense Command. Let me understand this correctly, Admiral Yoonji said. She was a small woman with gray hair and cold eyes that had seen too many wars. Aliens are under attack by other aliens and they want our help. Yes, ma'am, Dong Hyun replied. He stood at attention, still nervous about being in the same room as the people who controlled Earth's military. The Villani sent us everything they know about the attack. The enemy is called the Void Claw Empire. They are part machine, part organic. They enslave entire populations and strip planets of all resources. Captain Taemin, commander of the Mars Defense Fleet, leaned forward. How long until the attacked system falls? Less than 48 hours, sir. Can we get there in time? The 7th Expeditionary Fleet could make the jump in 36 hours, Space Marshal Rodriguez said. But sir, we have not left the Sol system for combat operations in 50 years. Are we really considering this? The room fell silent. Everyone remembered why humanity had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy. The Centauri incident had shown that humans and aliens had very different ideas about acceptable warfare. A small alien civil war had been tearing apart the Centauri system. The galactic community had asked Earth to send peacekeepers to help stop the fighting. The humans had agreed, thinking it would be a simple police action. But when human soldiers saw civilians being murdered, they had not followed the careful rules of engagement that other species expected. They had ended the war in 72 hours by destroying both armies completely. The peace that followed lasted, but the other alien species had been horrified by human methods. The Centauri situation was different, said Captain Taemin. Those were 2 groups of the same species fighting each other. This is about genocide by an outside invader. The result was the same, General Peterson replied. We traumatized half the galaxy just by doing our job. If we go out there again, what happens when they see what we are really capable of? Admiral Yunji's tactical officer, Lieutenant Ha Young, spoke up. Ma'am, I have been studying the enemy ship movements. The Void Claw Empire is not just attacking this one system. They have been expanding for decades. At their current rate, they will reach human space within 100 years. 100 years is a long time, General Williams said. Yes, sir. But this might be our only chance to stop them while they are still far away, Ha Young replied. If we wait until they are on our doorstep, we will be fighting them in our own systems with our own civilians at risk. The debate continued. For another hour, some argued for staying isolated, others wanted to help but worried about the consequences. A few suggested sending only supplies or information, not actual military forces. Then a young man entered the room. Jae-ho was a xenolinguist, one of the few humans who studied alien languages and cultures. He looked nervous but determined. Admiral, I found something else in the alien transmission, he said. Hidden data streams that were not in the main message. What kind of data? Admiral Yunji asked. Ho activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The images that appeared made everyone stop talking. They showed Void Claw machines doing things that made even hardened military officers look away. Children being connected to cybernetic implants while still alive. Entire families being processed like meat in a factory. Peaceful cities being turned into cybernetic manufacturing centers, where the former inhabitants worked as slaves until their bodies gave out. The Void Claw do not just conquer, Jae-ho said, quietly. They take everything that makes a person human and use it as raw material. They keep the victims alive and aware while they do it. Some of these recordings show people who have been slaves for decades begging to be allowed to die. The room was completely quiet. Admiral Yunji looked around the table at the other commanders. These were people who had seen the worst that humans could do to each other in war. But what the aliens were showing was something else entirely. All in favor of military intervention, she asked. Every hand in the room went up. Motion carried, Admiral Yunji said. General Peterson, begin mobilizing ground forces for possible landing operations. Admiral Chen, I want submarine specialists ready in case we need underwater operations on alien worlds. General Williams, prep the strategic bomber wings. Space. Marshal Rodriguez, bring the 7th Fleet to full combat readiness. What about the dreadnoughts? Captain Taman asked. Admiral Yunji paused. The Ragnarok-class dreadnoughts were humanity's most secret weapon. Other alien species suspected they existed but had never seen one. Each ship carried enough firepower to crack a moon and weapons that violated every galactic treaty that humans had never signed. Bring them too, she said. All of them. Within 6 hours, the largest human military force in 50 years was preparing to leave the Sol system. The 7th Expeditionary Fleet consisted of 12 carrier groups, 48 destroyer squadrons, 6 heavy cruiser wings, and 3 Ragnarok-class dreadnoughts. But the most important part of the fleet was not the ships. It was the 50,000 human soldiers, pilots, and officers who crewed them. These were people who had grown up on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They had evolved from hunters who could chase prey for days without stopping. They had learned to fight wars where surrender meant death for everyone they cared about. For the first time in 50 years, humanity was going to war. The galaxy was about to remember why they had been afraid of the monsters from Earth. Admiral Eunji stood on the bridge of her flagship, the carrier Soul's Pride, and watched her fleet prepare to jump to hyperspace. She thought about the alien civilians who were dying while she sat in safety. She thought about the enemy that was coming toward human space, whether they acted now or not. All ships, this is Admiral Yunji, she announced over the fleet communications. We are about to do something that has not been done in 50 years. We are going to remind the galaxy that humanity does not abandon those who need help. Jump in 30 seconds. The stars around the fleet began to change as the hyperspace engines activated. In 36 hours, the people of the Altair system would learn that their call for help had been answered. They were about to meet humanity. Admiral Veltar watched his homeworld burn from the bridge of his last remaining battleship. The Void Claw had been attacking the Altair system for 2 days, and his people were losing badly. Their beautiful cities were now smoking ruins. Their orbital defense stations were twisted metal floating in space. Sir, the enemy is preparing for final assault on the civilian evacuation ships, his tactical officer reported. The young Kashari's voice was steady, but Veltar could see the fear in his large eyes. Veltar looked at the main screen. Dozens of refugee ships filled with families were trying to escape to the outer planets. But the Voidclaw hunter-killers were already moving to intercept them. In a few hours, everyone he had sworn to protect would be dead or worse. "Any word from the other sectors?" he asked, knowing the answer already. "No, sir. We are alone." Veltar closed his eyes. He had fought in 3 wars during his long career, but this was different. The Voidclaw did not fight like normal enemies. They showed no mercy, took no prisoners, and made no deals. They simply took everything and moved on to the next target. "Sir," the sensor operator suddenly shouted. "Massive hyperspace disturbances at the system edge. Something big is coming through." On the screen, space itself began to twist and bend. Energy readings spiked beyond anything in their databases. Whatever was coming through hyperspace was using power levels that should have been impossible. Could it be reinforcements from the core worlds? The tactical officer asked with hope in his voice. "No," Veltar said quietly. "Core world ships do not generate that much energy. This is something else." The first ships to appear were unlike anything Veltar had ever seen. Where most spacecraft were smooth and curved, these new arrivals were all angles and armor plating. They looked less like spaceships and more like flying weapons. Rows of gun turrets covered every surface, instead of the elegant lines preferred. By civilized species, these ships seemed designed by people who expected to fight constantly. "Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Veltar of the Keshari Defense Fleet," he transmitted on all frequencies. "Please identify yourselves." The response came immediately in perfect Keshari language. "This is Captain Minho of the Terran vessel Soul's Vengeance. We received your distress call. Stand by for combat operations." "Terran?" Veltar's tactical officer whispered. "That means human." Everyone on the bridge fell silent. They had heard stories about the humans, whispered tales that most people thought were myths, a species so violent that they had been banned from civilized space. Warriors who came from a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. "Humans," Veltar said slowly. "We called for help, and humans answered. More human ships appeared from hyperspace. Destroyers, cruisers, and massive carriers that launched swarms of fighter craft. But it was not their size that impressed Veltar. It was how they moved. Most space battles were careful, calculated affairs. Ships kept their distance, exchanged long-range fire, and tried to avoid unnecessary damage. The humans did none of these things. The lead destroyer, Soul's Vengeance, accelerated directly toward the largest group of Voidclaw ships. Instead of slowing down as it got closer, it went faster. Captain Minho was flying straight into the enemy formation like he planned to ram them. "What are they doing?" the tactical officer asked in horror. The Voidclaw response was immediate and overwhelming. 3 of their world killer ships turned their main weapons toward the approaching human vessel. Plasma beams that could melt asteroids lanced out toward Soul's Vengeance. Any sane commander would have retreated or at least tried to dodge. Captain Minho did neither. His ship flew right through the enemy fire, its armor glowing red-hot but holding together. When he reached point-blank range, every weapon on his ship opened fire at once. "This is Captain Minho to all human vessels." His voice came over the communications. "We have a job to do. These metal bastards have been killing civilians. Show them what happens when they mess with innocent people." What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries. The human destroyers did not fight like any known species. They accepted damage that would cripple normal ships and kept fighting. When their shields failed, they used their armor. When their armor was breached, they sealed the damaged sections and continued combat. Commander So Young of the destroyer Busan Rising found herself surrounded by 4 Voidclaw cruisers. Her ship was taking hits that should have destroyed it, but she refused to retreat. Instead, she ordered her crew to overload the reactor and ram the nearest enemy ship. "This is So Young to any human ships in range," she transmitted as her vessel began to break apart. "I am about to show these machines something they have never seen before. Tell my family I died protecting people who needed help." Busan Rising hit the Void Claw command ship at full speed. The explosion destroyed both vessels and damaged 3 others nearby. But instead of being horrified by the loss, the other human ships seemed to become more aggressive. Veltar watched in fascination and terror as the human fleet fought with a ferocity that defied logic. When their ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When they were outnumbered, they attacked anyway. When the situation was hopeless, they made it into an opportunity. A group of human fighters, led by squadron leader Jun-Ho, flew directly into a cloud of Void Claw hunter-killers. The alien machines outnumbered them 10-1, but the human pilots fought with precision and rage that made the Void Claw formations fall apart. "Target the reactor cores," Jun-Ho ordered his pilots. "These things are machines. Cut off their power and they die like anything else." The human fighters moved through the enemy formation like dancers, dodging and weaving between much larger opponents. But unlike most fighter pilots, who tried to avoid damage, the humans seemed to accept that they would be hit. They just made sure that every hit they took also resulted in a dead enemy. As the battle continued, Veltar began to understand why the humans had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy. They did not fight wars the way civilized beings were supposed to fight wars. They fought wars the way apex predators fought for survival. But there was something else in their fighting style, something that made Veltar feel hope for the first time in days. The humans were not fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting because they could not stand to see innocent people being hurt. When Captain Minho saw a group of Void Claw ships moving toward the refugee evacuation fleet, he did not hesitate. He ordered his entire squadron to intercept, even though they were already outnumbered and damaged. "All human ships, this is Minho," he transmitted. "Priority target is the evacuation fleet. These people called us for help, and we are going to give it to them, whatever it costs." The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, 12 human ships had been destroyed, and hundreds of human soldiers were dead. But the Void Claw had lost over 60% of their invasion fleet. The survivors retreated into deep space, carrying with them something they had never experienced before: fear. Tar quote, as communication officer established contact with the human flagship. "This is Admiral Veltar to the human fleet commander. I do not know how to thank you for what you have done today." The response came from Admiral Yunji herself. "No thanks needed, Admiral. We heard that innocent people were in trouble. We came to help. That is what you do for neighbors." "Neighbors?" Veltar asked. "That is right," Admiral Yunji replied. "As of today, the Kashari people are under the protection of the Terran Defense Force. Anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through us first." Veltar looked at the tactical display showing the retreating Void Claw ships and the human vessels moving to escort his people to safety. For 50 years, the galaxy had been afraid of humanity because they were too dangerous to trust. Now he understood the truth. Humanity was not dangerous to those who needed protection. They were dangerous to those who threatened the innocent. And that made all the difference in the universe. The rest of Admiral Yunji's fleet arrived at Altair just as the cleanup operations began. Captain Wu Jin, commander of the carrier Incheon's Pride, watched through his bridge windows as recovery teams searched for survivors among the wreckage of both human and alien ships. "Admiral on deck," someone shouted as Yunji herself materialized on the bridge via holographic communicator. "Captain Wu Jin, what is the status of our forces?" she asked without introduction. 12 ships lost. "Ma'am, 437 crew members killed in action. But the Void Claw took much heavier losses. Our tactical assessment suggests they lost nearly 2/3 of their invasion fleet." Admiral Yunji nodded grimly. "And the civilians?" "All evacuation ships reached safety. The Kashari are calling it a miracle." "It was not a miracle," Yunji replied. "It was good people doing their jobs under impossible circumstances. Speaking of which, I need you to prepare your fighter squadrons for extended patrol operations. Intelligence suggests the Void Claw may attempt to regroup and counterattack." As if summoned by her words, Lieutenant Sun He appeared on the bridge. She was the fleet's xenobiologist, a young woman who specialized in studying alien life forms. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Admiral, I have finished analyzing the captured Voidclaw technology, she said. We need to talk. Privately. 20 minutes later, Sun He stood in the secure briefing room aboard the flagship Seoul's Pride. Around the table sat Admiral Yoonji, Captain Woo Jin, and the other senior commanders of the human fleet. What did you find? Admiral Yoonji asked. Sun-He activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Voidclaw ship. The technology is definitely a hybrid of organic and mechanical components. But the more I study it, the more I realize something disturbing. Which is, the Voidclaw are not expanding because they want to conquer the galaxy, Sun He said quietly. They are expanding because they are running from something. The room fell silent. Captain Taemin, who had arrived with the main fleet, leaned forward. Running from what? I found data fragments in their computer systems, references to something they call the Core Devourers. From what I can translate, these entities started appearing in the Galactic Center about 200 years ago. They do not just destroy civilizations, they consume the fundamental forces that hold reality together. Admiral Yoonji frowned. That sounds like science fiction. I thought so too, ma'am. But the Voidclaw data includes sensor readings of entire star systems where the laws of physics have simply stopped working. Gravity flows backward. Time moves in circles. Matter exists in states that should be impossible. Captain Woo Jin shook his head. Even if that is true, it does not excuse what the Voidclaw have done. They could have asked for help instead of enslaving innocent populations. I agree completely, sir, but we need to understand that this war is bigger than just stopping one group of raiders. If the Core Devourers are real and if they are moving toward inhabited space, then we may be facing something that makes the Voidclaw look like a minor threat. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Captain Yoonji's voice came over the communications system. All senior officers to battle stations. Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace signatures approaching the system. They rushed to the main bridge where Captain Yoonji stood before the tactical display. She was the commander of the dreadnought Dokdo's Wrath, humanity's most powerful warship. Her face showed the kind of calm that only came from years of combat experience. What are we looking at? Admiral Yoonji asked. Voidclaw reinforcements, ma'am, but not like anything we saw in the first battle. These energy readings suggest they brought their reserve fleets. We are looking at over 300 capital ships plus support vessels. The display showed a massive enemy formation emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. But unlike the first Voidclaw attack, which had been focused on conquest, this fleet was arranged for total annihilation. They are not coming to enslave this time, Captain Taemin observed. They want revenge. Admiral Yoonji studied the tactical situation. Her fleet had taken losses in the first battle. Even at full strength, they would be outnumbered 3-1 by this new enemy force. A conventional engagement would result in the destruction of both fleets and leave the Kashari defenseless. Captain Yu Jin, what is the status of your main gun? She asked. Jin smiled coldly. Charged and ready, ma'am. Though I should point out that using the relativistic cannon in a system with inhabited planets carries significant risks. Explain. The weapon accelerates tungsten projectiles to 90% of light speed. At that velocity, a direct hit will punch through anything in known space, but the exit trajectory could potentially damage planets or space stations behind the target. Admiral Yoonji looked at the tactical display again. The Voidclaw fleet was moving toward the inhabited worlds of the Altair system. In 6 hours, they would be in range to begin orbital bombardment of the civilian population. Can you guarantee precision targeting? She asked. Yes, ma'am. The targeting computer can calculate trajectories that will send exit shots into empty space. Then prepare to fire on my command. The human fleet moved into defensive formation around the inhabited planets. Unlike their previous aggressive tactics, this time they took up positions designed to protect civilians rather than destroy enemies. The Voidclaw, expecting another headlong charge, were confused by the change in human behavior. This is Admiral Feltar to the human fleet, came a transmission from the surviving Kashari forces. Our remaining ships are at your disposal. Negative, Admiral Veltar, Yunji replied. Keep your people back. This is about to get very dangerous. The Void Claw fleet opened fire at maximum range, sending clouds of plasma and kinetic projectiles toward the human ships. The humans absorbed the damage with their heavy armor and shielding, but did not return fire. Admiral, why are we not shooting back? Captain Wu Jin asked from the bridge of his carrier. Because we are waiting for them to get close enough that Captain Yu Jin cannot miss. Admiral Yunji replied calmly. The Void Claw, encouraged by the apparent lack of human response, moved closer. Their formation tightened as they prepared for close-range combat. They had learned from the first battle that humans were dangerous at short range, but they had brought enough ships to overwhelm any defense. What they had not brought was protection against weapons that violated the basic laws of physics. Captain Yu Jin, you have firing authorization. Admiral Yunji announced. The dreadnought Dokdo's Wrath had been designed during humanity's civil wars, when human fought human, with weapons too terrible to use against alien species. Its main gun was based on technology that most civilized species considered too dangerous to develop. The tungsten projectile left the cannon at 90% of light speed. To the Void Claw sensors, it simply appeared in the middle of their formation without warning. The first ship it hit was a command vessel the size of a small moon. The projectile passed through it like it was made of paper, leaving a hole that went from bow to stern. But the real devastation came from the secondary effects. At relativistic speeds, even the air molecules around the projectile became weapons. The exit wound in the command ship was visible from 3 planets away, and the shockwave destroyed 6 other vessels nearby. Direct hit on primary target, Captain Yu Jin reported with satisfaction. Enemy command structure is destroyed. The Void Claw fleet fell into chaos. Without their command ship, the individual vessels began operating independently. Some tried to retreat, others continued the attack, and a few seemed to be firing randomly in all directions. Captain Wu Jin chose that moment to launch his fighter squadrons. Led by Squadron Commander In-ho, the human fighters swept through the confused enemy formation like wolves hunting sheep. The pilots had studied Void Claw tactics during the first battle, and now knew exactly where to hit the enemy ships to cause maximum damage. Focus on the reactor cores and computer systems, In-ho ordered his pilots. These machines cannot fight, if they cannot think. The battle lasted 4 hours. By the end, the second Void Claw fleet was destroyed or scattered. The surviving enemy ships fled into deep space, carrying news of humanity's terrible weapons to whatever remained of their empire. Admiral Yunji stood on her bridge, looking at the tactical display showing the debris field that had once been the most powerful Void Claw fleet ever assembled. Around her, the crew worked quietly to assess damage and casualties. Admiral, Lieutenant Sun Hee approached with a data pad in her hands. I have been analyzing transmissions from the fleeing Void Claw ships. What did you find? They are not retreating to their usual staging areas, ma'am. They are heading back toward the galactic core, and they are broadcasting something on all frequencies. What kind of transmissions? Sun Hee hesitated. Warning signals, ma'am. They are telling the rest of their empire about us. About humanity. They are calling us the Deathworld Hunters and advising all Void Claw forces to avoid human space at all costs. Admiral Yunji nodded slowly. Good. Maybe that will keep them away from innocent people. There is something else, ma'am. The broadcasts also mention the core devourers. According to these messages, the entities from the Galactic Center have begun moving into inhabited space. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Altair, and the galaxy was no longer the same place it had been before humanity emerged from isolation. Captain Hayuk guided his patrol squadron through the Outer Rim territories, checking on the colonies that had sprung up in the wake of Void Claw defeats. Contact ahead, his sensor operator reported. 3 ships, configuration matches Void Claw design, but they are broadcasting surrender codes. This had become common in recent months. Small groups of Void Claw forces, cut off from their main fleets, would surrender to human patrols rather than face the mysterious entities that were consuming the galactic core. Captain Hayuk had processed dozens of these surrenders, and each one told the same story. Something was coming from the center of the galaxy, and it was worse than anything anyone had imagined. This is Captain Hyuk of the Terran vessel Gwangju's shield. He transmitted to the approaching ships. State your intentions. Human Commander, this is Sub-Commander Vexhai of the Voidclaw Remnant Fleet, came the reply in heavily accented standard. We request sanctuary under the Terran protection protocols. We have information about the core devourers. Hyuk sighed. The Terran protection protocols had been Admiral Yunji's idea. A way to encourage defecting Voidclaw forces to provide intelligence about the growing threat from the Galactic Center. Any enemy who surrendered and provided useful information could claim protection under human authority. It was working, but it was also creating problems no one had anticipated. Human space was now filled with former enemies who were desperate for protection from something even worse than themselves. Permission granted, Hyuk replied. Follow us to Processing Station Omega, and Sub-Commander, do not make any sudden movements. My crew is still getting used to not shooting Voidclaw ships on sight. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic station orbiting the Altair system, an unprecedented meeting was taking place. Admiral Hyun-woo of the Vallani sat across from Captain Ji-hai, humanity's first official ambassador to alien species. 6 months ago, Ji-hai had been one of the strongest voices against military intervention. She had argued that humanity should stay isolated to avoid causing more trauma to alien civilizations. Now she found herself trying to build the first multi-species alliance in galactic history. The Zenthari Federation has agreed to contribute 12 defense fleets to the combined force, Admiral Hyun-woo reported. The Crystal Collective is providing advanced sensor technology. The Healer Coalition is offering medical support. Ji-hai nodded as she made notes on her datapad. What about the warrior clans from the Rigel sector? They are still debating. Their culture values individual combat prowess. The idea of coordinated fleet operations with multiple species is difficult for them to accept. I understand their concerns, Ji-hai said. Humans had the same problem when we first started working with alien forces. Different species fight differently. The key is finding ways to use those differences as strengths rather than weaknesses. Through the station's windows, they could see the combined defense fleet taking shape. Human carriers worked alongside Vallani research vessels, Zenthari battleships, coordinated with Crystal Collective sensor arrays. It was messy and complicated, but it was also something that had never existed before. A truly united galactic military force. The alliance had been Ji-hai's greatest achievement, built on a simple principle that even the most different species could understand. Some things were worth protecting regardless of the cost. But even as the political situation improved, the military situation was getting worse. Long-range sensors were detecting energy signatures moving from the galactic core toward inhabited space. Whatever the core devourers were, they were no longer content to stay in the center of the galaxy. Admiral Yunji stood in the command center of Forward Base Altair, studying the latest intelligence reports. The base had grown from a temporary military outpost into the headquarters of humanity's first interstellar empire. But unlike the empires of history, this one existed not to conquer, but to protect. Admiral, we have a priority message from Captain Taemin's deep space reconnaissance mission, her aide reported. Put it through. Captain Taemin's image appeared on the main screen. His face was grim, and there was something in his eyes that Yunji had not seen since the worst days of the civil wars on Mars. Admiral, we have found them, he said without introduction. The core devourers. What Lieutenant Sun He discovered. In the Voidclaw data was correct, but it was worse than we thought. Show me. The screen changed to display sensor readings from the edge of known space. At first, Admiral Yunji could not understand what she was looking at. The data showed star systems, but the readings were impossible. This system should have a G-type star and 7 planets, Captain Taemin explained. Instead, we are reading gravitational anomalies that flow in reverse, time dilation fields that loop back on themselves, matter that exists in quantum states that violate basic physics. Are there any signs of the inhabitants? Gone. Not dead, not evacuated. Gone. As if they never existed. The only traces are these structures. The image zoomed in to show massive geometric shapes floating in space where planets should have been. They were not built from any known materials. They seem to be made from folded space-time itself, creating three-dimensional objects that hurt to look at. How big are they? Admiral Yunji asked. Each one is roughly the size of Earth's moon, Captain Taemin replied. And Admiral, they are moving toward us. At the rate they are traveling, they will reach the outer colonies within 18 months. Admiral Yunji closed her eyes and tried to process what she was seeing. Humanity had spent centuries learning to fight other humans. They had adapted those skills to fight the Void Claw. But how did you fight enemies that could rewrite the laws of physics? Captain, return to base immediately, she ordered, and transmit all sensor data to the research teams. We need to understand what we are
dealing with.
2 weeks later, the emergency session of the Combined Defense Council convened in the council chambers of Forward Base Altair. Representatives from 14 different species sat around a circular table, with Admiral Yunji at the head. The UI's situation is simple, she began. We are facing an enemy that we do not understand, using weapons that should not exist, for reasons that we cannot comprehend. They have already consumed dozens of star systems, and they are heading toward inhabited space. Captain Jihai stood to address the council. Admiral Hyunwoo's research teams have been analyzing the sensor data. What we are seeing appears to be entities that consume not just matter and energy, but the fundamental structure of reality itself. How do we fight something like that? Asked General Kothvar of the warrior clans. The same way we fight everything else, Admiral Yunji replied. We find their weaknesses, we use our strengths, and we refuse to give up. But Admiral, interjected Scholar Zendai of the Crystal Collective, these beings appear to operate outside the normal rules of space and time. Our conventional weapons may be useless against them. Then we will make unconventional weapons, Admiral Yunji said firmly. Humanity has spent its entire existence fighting things that should have been able to kill us. We survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and each other. We did it by adapting, learning, and never accepting that something was impossible to defeat. Captain Hayek, who had been promoted to fleet commander, leaned forward. What are you proposing, Admiral? I am proposing that we take everything we have learned about warfare, everything we have discovered about physics, and everything we believe about what is possible, and we throw it all away. Then we start over with one simple question. How do we kill something that rewrites reality? Over the following months, the greatest scientific and military minds in the galaxy worked together on a problem that had never been attempted before. Human weapons experts collaborated with Villani theoretical physicists. Zenthari engineers worked with Crystal Collective quantum specialists. The result was something that no single species could have created alone. Weapons that used controlled reality distortions, ships that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and defensive systems based on quantum uncertainty principles. But the most important development was not technological. It was the realization that 14 different species, with 14 different ways of thinking, could work together when faced with extinction. The first core Devourer scouts appeared at the edge of known space on a Tuesday morning, ship time. Long-range sensors detected reality distortions moving toward the outer colonies at impossible speeds. Admiral Yunji stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the unified defense ship Terra's Promise. Around her, officers from multiple species worked at stations that had been redesigned for maximum cooperation between different types of beings. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Yunji, she transmitted to the Combined Defense Fleet. Today, we face something that has never been faced before. We do not know if our weapons will work. We do not know if our tactics will be effective. We do not know if we can win. She paused, looking out at the vast fleet of ships representing every major civilization in the galaxy. But we know one thing with absolute certainty. We are not going to let our homes be destroyed without a fight. We are not going to abandon our families to these things.